The appraisal value came back $100,000 less than what we had initially purchased for.
Welcome to The Homestretch, your go-to podcast for real estate trends, expert insights, and unique paths to homeownership. In today's episode, we chat with industry professional Viviane Nunes about her journey from law to real estate, the challenges of being a female immigrant in the industry, and how Ourboro's shared equity program is transforming homeownership.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode. My name is Kjorven. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Ourboro. Today, we have a very special guest. I refer to her as sort of the unicorn of our referral partners. We have Viviane Nunes, who is not only a mortgage broker and a real estate agent, but she is also an Ourboro homeowner. It has been phenomenal to work with her. She's been a referral partner with us since 2022 and has since done numerous deals and helped a number of her clients get into homeownership using the Ourboro program. Welcome, Viviane.
Thank you for having me, Alex. It's always so great to see you.
Thank you for making the trek down. So I think, set the expectations high there.
Oh, my goodness.
but not in a bad way, because your story is so remarkable. So maybe to kick things off, let audience or listeners know, how did you learn about Ourboro? What was your story? You've actually shared this on CTV, and we've definitely heard it, or not heard it, but we've definitely celebrated it in the past. But I'd love to hear from you today.
And I'm honestly very, very proud of our relationship and the partnership that we've developed, because Ourboro not only helped my clients, but it helped me and my family, right? During a time that was of great stress. And,
yes, I remember.
When I had a big problem to solve, Ourboro came in and you guys were phenomenal to work with. So I became a big advocate for Ourboro.
Such a champion.
Yeah. And sometimes it's so funny. There was an interview that I did with CTV. Yeah. And it was a great interview. It had a great outcome. But at the end, there's always the haters, right? And then I remember watching some of the comments, and some people were saying, "Oh, this girl is in cahoots with Ourboro."
It's it's the other way around.
And I'm no, I'm not lying. I'm not a paid actor.
It's the other way around.
Own story.
Yeah. Right? In fact, if I'm recommending something to my clients, I've used it myself. That only makes me more credible.
Exactly. Yeah. But basically, when I found Ourboro in 2022, I was actually researching for one of my clients that had asked me about information on rent-to-own programs or anything that could help them bridge that gap into becoming a homeowner, right? Because they were in that scenario where they have little to almost no down payment, and they were trying to buy something. So they were like, "Viviane, what are the options?" I always loved the educational approach and researching and finding out alternative solutions for my clients. So I started to research, and then all of a sudden Ourboro came up in my search, and I started to look at information. So I sent an email to the team and I said, "Hey, I would love to get to know more of the company and everything." And then we signed up for a live.
Oh, a
Remember?
seminar. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So we did a live together on Instagram, and I was actually in Brazil visiting my family.
You were in Brazil when we did that?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I hopped on Instagram. We did a live, and it was so good and so informative in many ways. And I thought, wow, what a great company and what a great option, right? Yeah. So fast forward a couple weeks later, I was actually in the process of buying a new build.
Oh, condo.
To which we were extremely excited. It was a townhome, brand new in the Durham region. And we had started making plans and had signed the contract just over a year before that. And our closing date was actually fast approaching in the next couple of weeks. Little did I know when I was doing the live with you that I was going to become a client.
Oh.
Because here's the deal. I left to visit.
Goosebumps.
Listen to this story, guys. I left to visit my family and spend Christmas back home in Brazil. And when I left, all my house was packed in cardboard boxes. I had signed out my kids from school because I was going to
they're transferring to school.
Transferring them to the new school. The plan was to come back from our trip and move right away. We weren't even going to spend one night in the property. In fact, my husband was coming to Canada a little earlier to do the move with his friends and with the help
so
of a
you
company.
can arrive and just be in your new home.
More or less, because we're moms, right? We know
Yeah.
how it works. I would arrive to a house full of boxes and
Yeah.
have to unpack and get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And everything was planned before we left to visit our family. We had done the last inspection at the property, done a walkthrough.
Oh.
Everything was fine and ready to go. We had been approved by the bank. We were just waiting for the appraisal.
Oh, the darn appraisal.
Days after I had that interview, that live with
we
you,
did, yeah.
I get the appraisal back. And that's exactly the timing where the market took a turn and prices dropped significantly. Guess what happened? The price came back, the appraisal value came back $100,000 less than what we had initially purchased for. And that was completely unprecedented for our history in the GTA of home prices. Normally, especially for new builds, the historic
their entire business model for developers is based on
would be to buy
appreciation.
something, and then by the time it's ready, the house would actually be worth a little
more.
bit more than what you paid for on paper.
Yeah.
But then I was one of those unfortunate buyers.
Yeah, and I remember there's a lot of people in that position.
There were like hundreds of people in the GTA in that same situation. I remember seeing on the news people were protesting in front of builder offices. It was like crazy.
Yeah.
But there is really nothing you can do because you're legally bound to that contract.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, to make a long story short, we ended up, seeking for alternative lenders. Since now our loan to value was above what the minimum required would be.
Below, much lower.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I needed to find a lender. I did find a lender which would have a much higher interest rate.
Yeah, it would have been.
And then I was like, okay, it's either we buy that townhome for an overinflated
really
price.
Force it to make it work.
And make it work, but with a very inflated mortgage payment with a huge interest rate, or we let go of the property, we lose our deposit, $100,000. Yeah.
Oh, I cringe. Yeah.
But we were like, what did I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? Right. So I remember like praying at night and I was like, God, please help us. And I felt so much peace in my heart at the same time. And I didn't even know where that peace was coming from because I was literally in the eye of the hurricane.
You were.
My husband and I, we were like so much distraught because it was like right before Christmas and all our plans.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, where do I go? I had given notice to my landlord at the time that I was leaving.
Yeah.
So I was
where do you even live? Like, let alone the financial aspect of it.
And then there's so much involved, right? Especially being a realtor, I knew that I would have to find a place and I would have to go into a lease agreement of at least like, let's say a year.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's hard to find something short term and then, move kids to school for a year and then potentially
Change
to then
them
be able to
again.
buy again something. And I'm like, what do I do? So I still had half of my down payment.
Yeah.
But I would lose the deposit.
Right.
The deposit if I were to walk away from that purchase.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day, I'm a big numbers person. We sat down, we were looking at the numbers.
Sunk cost.
And it did not make sense to force the situation to still buy that townhome for an overinflated price.
Right.
And at the time, it was very hard and very painful to walk away from
$100,000.
$100,000.
Yeah.
But that's when I remember one night I was like in the middle of those restless nights, thinking, what are we going to do? And then I thought about Ourboro. I was like, wait a minute, maybe
we can
help
give you the $100,000 for your next property.
Exactly. And then here's how it made sense for me. I was going to buy a property that I was paying way more than what it was worth at the time versus letting go of that $100,000 that I had already put down as a deposit. And then with the help of Ourboro, buying something that I would not be able to buy otherwise during the times where the prices were up.
Right. Yeah. Take advantage of the lower market rates.
Exactly. So prices have come down, and now for the price that I would be paying for that townhome, I would be able to buy a detached home with a huge lot.
Yeah.
4 bedrooms, finished basement, a pool in the backyard. For the love of God, I love
Palatial
myself.
estate. Yeah.
If I show you my backyard. And I was like, why am I going to be fighting over this? Oh, I don't want to lose $100,000. And I'm like, of course, it's a lot of money, but we work hard. And I know that, things are going to work out at the end later down the road, appreciation and everything else. The appreciation on a detached home, even though I was buying with the help of Ourboro, would be significantly more than if I had, fought for that townhome and stayed on that townhome.
Yeah.
And never mind, that was a 4-bedroom townhome. It was beautiful. It was brand new, but it was much smaller.
Yeah.
And even like I work from home, I need an office. I was going to put my 2 girls to share a room.
Sure, they would love that.
Not ideal when they're like, with a big age gap.
Yeah.
And now in my new home, I have my office space. I have a guest room. They each have their own bedroom. We have backyard. We have everything that we needed. So at the end of the day, it worked out in such a way that it was such a blessing to be able to have Ourboro to partner up with at that time. That's why I have no shame whatsoever to share my story. It's a very vulnerable moment for us because we had a big financial loss, but I understand that it was not our fault or anyone's fault. Is the market, is the economy that was taking a big hit. A lot of home buyers were going through that same stress. But I was so fortunate because not many of them had the opportunity to find a partner such as Ourboro to help me during that time.
I love that story because so many people were in the same situation as you mentioned. Like when those new developer properties were being appraised right before closing, many people were in the same boat. But your story is also still quite unique because you had the knowledge and the wisdom, I should say, the wisdom to recognize that it was you were better off walking away rather than trying to like force it to work and being at a much higher, like imagine how much your monthly mortgage payments would have been. It would
be a much higher mortgage payment. And guess what? Right now, those townhomes are decreasing more and more in value.
There you go. That $100K would have been lost in that alone.
That $100K would become $200K
of loss.
Plus, I would be strained for those mortgage payments. So I would just dig myself a deeper and deeper hole just because I didn't want to lose the $100,000.
I know, but so many,
you know what I mean?
It is such a, when you look at these situations, like obviously she made the smart choice, but in that moment, it's so hard to have that clarity. And I commend you. Like I so admire your courage and like I said, your wisdom. I think your professional training may have helped you, give you that pragmatism. So maybe as a segue into kind of your background, maybe Viviane, tell us a bit like how you got to this route of being a mortgage broker and a realtor. And I hear there's a bit of a lawyer in you as well too.
Well, I came to Canada 18 years ago, and believe it or not, I went to law school, and I was almost getting my degree when my husband and I decided to immigrate to Canada. And this opportunity came, and we were like, okay, let's start our lives. We're very adventurous that way, and we moved to Canada. So no law degree for me.
So you seem to have a history of knowing when to cut your losses.
Exactly. And that's the thing, because and that was exactly the decision that we made, because I still had about 6 months to a year of law school. And then I was like, why am I going to continue doing this if I know that I won't be able to transfer my degree over to Canada? I should just stop here and start planning for my life there, right?
Oh my God, I can't believe you.
And another thing is, another fun fact, not so fun when you're living through it. I came with zero English. I spoke no English whatsoever when I arrived.
Wow.
And so I literally
want to
had
be you
to
when I
start
grow
over.
up.
No, I'm telling you. But I think one thing that I always say to people is like, if I were able to do it, then literally anyone should be able to make it into this world. Because as long as you're resilient and you fast forward and you're putting the effort, you should be able to accomplish anything. So I started a career from zero. So I started basically, like, my first job in Canada was as a cleaner. And then I got a job at a call center, speaking no English whatsoever and getting calls from Texas. I remember, like, I've been yelled at and called names that to this
don't
day, I have
understand.
no idea
And
what
for-
it means.
yeah.
I don't have any intention of knowing.
I love that. I have to ask, like, I think as well, like being a woman and an immigrant in a field that, like, even the mortgage industry in general is still quite male dominated. Like, women, I think, for the most part, are still very much the minority. What's been your experience kind of navigating this? Like, you clearly you have the gumption, you've got the grit, you've gotten through a lot, and now that you've kind of made it in a way, what's your reflection there of being a woman immigrant in a very male dominated space?
I find that nowadays women are becoming more and more the decision makers, or
Yes.
if not the decision makers, like they're like involved in that process much more than they used to be 20, 30
And
years
that's
ago.
backed up by data. I think, I mean, I may be getting it, but something like women are now making close to 80% of the financial decisions in a household. So that's
Exactly.
very real. Yeah.
It's fairly common when I'm having a conversation with a couple that the woman is the one that knows all the ins and outs and the numbers and everything and has all the documentation.
And are thinking and asking all the questions. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of times men are also in that role, but women are participating more and more.
Yep.
So I think, especially when I see my socials and the stats on my own channels, like a lot of my followers are women.
Yep.
So I think they connect and they resonate much more with me being a woman when I'm explaining. And I have that whole educational piece inside of me where I love educating people. And my biggest passion is really helping people.
Yeah, you've really leaned into connecting with the like women in your audience and the immigrants, like the language aspect you do. So Viviane will translate a lot of her content from English and Portuguese, FYI, for those who don't know. So I've seen that. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
For Ourboro, close to 60% of our homeowners were not born in Canada. And our business model, our mission, like we recognize that those who come to Canada, they don't have the generational wealth that many people who grew up in Canada and they have their parents and the grandparents, they've been accumulating wealth, mostly likely through real estate for decades. So it is those newcomer communities that we find our product resonates a lot with as well too.
Exactly. And so I developed a big passion on helping those people, right, to figure out, like that's how I started my journey at the bank. I was a teller, and then quickly I evolved into being a banker, like just giving people advice and opening bank accounts, opening their first bank accounts most of the times, and helping them plan for their next steps and how to, from getting their health card, where they should go to get their kids enrolled at school, and
just
and general information.
demystifying the journey of
Exactly.
being a resident of Canada.
Yes, but even like I developed a big passion on helping them plan for their home ownership program. Journey, I should say. Because a lot of times people that arrive from other countries, they think it's impossible to own a home.
Or they didn't even consider it at all. It's not even,
Exactly. So I was like, okay, here's what you can do. Let's start a savings plan and make it staggered in a way that in X amount of months or X amount of years, you're going to be able to, have your down payment. And then after that, this is what we're going to do. So I was so fortunate to be able to work with a lot of communities and a lot of clients in that sense, giving them that guidance and helping you navigate through. So what happened was that I started to develop a big clientele, people from many different communities and cultures that started to bring their own friends and family to come and sit down with me and do that financial planning with me, and then, open their bank accounts and then start the process. And so I remember at the time there was program that I started to develop with RSPs. So after they worked their first year, they had that income, and I was like, okay, let's do an RSP plan, and then you can use that RSP
for your down payment.
And so people that thought that they would never be able to afford a home in Canada, all of a sudden within a couple of years of being in Canada, mind you, we were in Winnipeg, so the prices there were more affordable, but having like husband and wife working full time, they were able to afford to start that ownership journey, and I was like so glad to be able to do that.
And remind me, how long ago was this when you first started that?
That was like over 15 years ago.
Yeah. And the market's probably even changed a lot since then.
Yes.
Right? Like, I wonder if you could, that same strategy, if you were to rinse and repeat and do it today, whether it could still.
You could actually.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
I did a calculation the other day, and like even for clients who want to join Ourboro, like let's say someone can go from $0 to $35,000 in down payment within 90 days.
Oh, yeah. If you save amount and if you have some savings in your RSPs, that would get you a $700,000 with a $35,000 contribution. I think you could buy a $700,000 property with
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, if you have 0 down payment, or maybe you just have enough for closing costs, but you don't have anything saved up for down payment. If you have no debts or just a small amount of debt, like maybe a car loan, something small, and you have a good income between husband and wife, both are working full time, you're able to get an RSP loan maximizer. Now, the catch on those, or rather the good thing about the RSP loan maximizer is that you usually get a lower interest rate compared to regular loans, and they amortize over sometimes up to 10 years. So your monthly payments are very affordable.
Right.
So I did the calculation for a $35,000 loan, for instance, an RSP maximizer loan. Your payment would be about $395 a month, which is quite affordable if you don't have other expenses. Then you take that money, put into an RSP, wait for 90 days, and now you have $35,000. And then you join Ourboro, get the additional 15% down.
Imagine that headline. We'll have to review that, Tyson, and then but imagine the headline being like, own a home with 90 days.
I actually did a video on that.
I actually had not, considered that myself. But they say it's the best mortgage brokers or realtors. I've heard both realtors and mortgage brokers. They say the ones that are really good at what they do. They're like, I'm a financial advisor and a therapist and a mortgage broker and a realtor, or interior designer. You have to be such a jack of all trades to really fully support your clients, because purchasing a home is such a big decision. It touches on so many facets of your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think being a problem solver and, creating those bridges for the gaps that the clients have, or to understand, what's the difficulties that they have and what the things that they need to overcome is what really makes you successful. Because a lot of people just think that it's not possible, and then you show them the way, you show them alternatives, you show them what they can do, and they make an informed decision based on actual facts and information and things that you're educating them on. And that's one of my biggest passions.
Yeah. It seems like you help them find the creative ways to solve a problem that they wouldn't even think was an option before, and make them feel like comfortable with it and de-risk that, that decision for them. Yeah.
Exactly. That's my biggest passion.
It's your biggest superpower.
Yes.
I've seen your content, and we've worked together for several years now. You've done a number of deals with Ourboro home buyers, but having followed you, I'd say one of your super strengths is kind of demystifying complex topics and complex concepts for your audience. So if when you're talking about Ourboro, how do you talk about the core value proposition to your clients?
So I think there are many aspects on why I believe Ourboro can help you close that gap. Number one is that sometimes the pre-approval that you get is just not enough to buy anything, especially when you talk about the Greater Toronto area or even Toronto itself.
Exactly.
A lot of my clients, they come to me and they say, okay, these are my numbers. How much can I get pre-approved for? And I come back with a pre-approval of $500,000. And they're like, okay, what can I get for $500,000? And it's very limited options. You may be able to get a condo nowadays, but when you're talking about a family, let's say they have 2 or 3 kids, a condo is just not an option, right? Yeah. Unless they want to be squished for a few years until they can build that equity and hopefully
the market
move
increases.
Up the ladder.
Yeah.
It's just something that it's not an option for a lot of people. So then all of a sudden, when they join Ourboro, they now can go from $500,000 to $600,000. And then if they go to the suburbs, they can find a townhome for that price point. I actually had a client that I just helped with the help of Ourboro now in January that was this exact scenario.
Wow, yeah.
And they were so happy.
Yeah.
They went from looking at 2-bedroom condos and that were so small,
Yeah.
and they have 2 girls, to now owning a townhome with 4 bedrooms, a walkout basement,
Oh,
you know, having a backyard.
Their own front door.
Exactly. Having a garage, you know, like being at a home that is comfortable for them,
Yeah.
and they can see themselves living in that space for, you know, a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing that I find with Ourboro is that there is a ladder, right, in real estate. A lot of people will start at a condo level and then they will live at that property for a few years, and then they'll sell, move into a townhome, and then they'll sell, move into a home.
Yeah.
Ourboro helps them go further into that ladder.
Yes. Yeah.
So
just
instead
accelerate
of starting
that
at the
process.
condo, they start at a townhome.
Yeah.
Right? And at the end of the day, I think everybody needs a place to live. Housing cost is something that we can't just say, oh, I'm not going to have it. You're going to have it unless you live with your parents.
You're either paying rent or you're paying a mortgage. So.
Exactly. So if you can find ways to get into home ownership sooner and pay something that is yours, why not?
Yeah.
It's a blessing, I think.
Yeah. And then in terms of that, helping people get through that ladder, it's those who may currently be able to afford a condo, and we help them get that townhome.
Exactly.
But it's also those who didn't even think they could get a condo, right? We could help them get into the market with that condo as a start as well, too.
And another side of this is also those clients that would not be able to get approved with conventional lenders or with an insured lender. So as you may know, people who are giving less than 20% down, they have to have their mortgage insured.
Yep.
And a lot of times, I worked for one of the major banks for 13 years. And a lot of times, we were able to get the file approved at our underwriting.
Yeah.
But we got gated at the insurance.
Oh.
So they would say, no, we are not going to approve this file. And all of a sudden, we can't give that client an approval because of their own guidelines.
Interesting.
Now, a client who's like, let's say, a self-employed person who can show their income but doesn't declare as much on their income taxes for whatever reason, for tax purposes, or, you know, whatever the situation may be. Maybe they're not with the credit score as a bank would want, you know, as a conventional lender would want, or as the insurer would like to. They have the 20% down now, and they can fit the criteria for a B lender and get into home ownership. And then a few years down the road, they're able to move into the A lender
and then
sell
refinance.
that property, either refinance or sell that property, get that equity, and then buy something else.
Yeah.
So I think it bridges the gap in so many ways. It's so much more than that additional down payment.
Yeah.
And that's why myself being a mortgage specialist and also a realtor, I see so much value in Ourboro.
Yeah, I love that. In terms of, you know, simplifying complex topics, like, again, one of your strengths that you do really well at, like, I've seen you break down numbers. Like, I've seen your Instagram stories. For those who don't follow Viviane, where am I looking? Follow her on Instagram. We'll provide the link. You give great tutorials and kind of numbers. You were showing me just earlier some of the breakdown of the benefits of working with Ourboro. People don't understand. Like, you were talking about the insurance piece, the difference that can make in terms of the amount of equity you have versus debt.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I, you know, oftentimes when I'm explaining Ourboro's model, people go like, well, but I don't want to share my equity. But I'm like,
so
you
let's do
have
the numbers.
No equity when you start and you have an insured mortgage. That's just the reality. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So let's say that client who were pre-approved for $500,000 purchase with a minimum 5% down payment, right? So 5% of $500,000 is $475,000. But there is a mortgage insurance of $19,000 and change being added to that $475,000
of mortgage.
So they end up starting their mortgage at $498,000
of a $500,000 property.
So their equity, it's gone by the time they get the keys for their home because of the insurance premiums that are being added to it. So at the end of the day, you have no equity when you begin with and you're going on your own. And your mortgage payments are going to be more inflated in terms of how much interest you're paying out of that monthly payment.
Because included in each payment is fees on that insurance.
Exactly.
Less of each payment is going towards principal.
So you're paying that mortgage much faster when you're now owing only 80% of that property value.
Right. So
I did a comparison between the person, if they were going alone with the $500,000 $100,000 purchase with a $25,000 down versus joining Ourboro, being able to buy a home of $600,000. Never mind that they're going $100,000 more on that property ladder and getting something that will suit their needs. But they're also, every time they make a mortgage payment, more of that mortgage payment is going towards the principal and less towards the interest.
Yeah.
So 5 years down the road, they're going to be owing much less than they would if they had started on their own.
Yeah.
So yes, you're going to be sharing the equity, but you're going to have more equity on your own, even after you split the share, than you would if you had started on your own.
Yeah. And that's very much a comparison that we try to explain to homeowners, where if you have the option to, so stepping back for a sec, as a general rule, we always say at Ourboro, like if you can afford to buy on your own, if you have the down payment savings to do it, absolutely, you are better off to buy on your own, right? Because you are in control, you are the sole owner. You know, our product is never meant to compete with somebody who has a 20% on their own or can own on their own. And if you ever have a choice to make between putting down 5% and owning 100% on your own, or putting down 20% with Ourboro, then the trade-off, the decision you have to make is, do I want a higher monthly cost? Do I want to have more debt and less equity on my property? Or do I want to have lower monthly payments and kind of like an easier monthly burden, but give up a portion of my future equity?
Exactly.
That's the way we kind of present those options. And everybody may choose differently, right? People will will weigh the risks of how much is my property going to appreciate. If that $500,000 condo that they buy on day one doubles in value in 10 years, they will get 100, and they owned it on their own. All of that appreciation will be theirs.
Yes.
So that is a benefit. But, with that $600,000 condo, they've been saving a lot more money all those years, right? Because they're paying less mortgage. And even though if that $600,000 condo doubles in value, they're sharing that appreciation with Ourboro, but they've also been saving a lot along the way.
Exactly.
So it's a trade-offs
and
are very clear.
And they have been living at a property that suits their
that
needs
suits
better.
Their needs.
That's
all
I
that
guess,
time,
is the
that
main
quality
point.
of life during that time. Yeah, that's so true.
Because you want to be squished for 5-10 years until you build enough equity.
Oh, and we've seen that so much, like being close to where you work or being close to where your kids can go to school, the good schools, etc. So I think
quality of life, it's a big factor for me too when I'm advising clients on whether may or may not be a good solution for them to join Ourboro.
Yeah.
Because like I was saying, if it's just a couple, let's say, or a person on their own, they may not need a bigger home. They're fine living in that condo on their own. So then they
may have other goals as well too, to build that equity or whatever it might be.
But I find that for families and people that actually have a need for something of a higher value, that's when Ourboro becomes a perfect solution for them.
Yeah.
Because it helps them bridge that gap, helps them move the ladder a little further and ahead of the game instead of having to wait and be squished for a few years and all of that.
I want to dig into that a little bit more because speaking of quality of life and happiness, Ourboro, we're very committed to putting our money where our mouth is. Is that the saying?
I guess.
My team, I mess this stuff up all the time.
Listen, I'm an immigrant. I have no idea.
Thank you. So we talk about the impact and how, we truly believe that the difference that we're making, but we want to be able to put data around it. So last year we launched this study to actually measure, the quality of life of our homeowners and compare that against a control group of renters. And the initial results that are coming in are very clear. Like Ourboro homeowners who are able to get into the home that suits their needs sooner, they far outperform their renter peers and they're comparable to other homeowners who owned on their own. So in other words, being a co-owner, there's no downsides to being a co-owner as compared to being a regular homeowner, but you get all the benefits of home ownership compared to renters. So anyways, that's the context. So I want to ask you, have you seen that firsthand?
Oh, absolutely.
Could you maybe share, what have you seen in your clients? What are you hearing from them having used Ourboro and kind of gotten into the market?
I think is the saying of pride of ownership is so true.
Yeah.
Right? Because you own that home. Yeah. So it's so amazing to be able to help them buy and pay something every month. Like I said, housing cost is a reality, whether you're paying to rent or whether you're paying for something that's your own.
Yeah.
But when you're buying something, when you're paying a monthly payment on something that is your own, it gives you that pride of of home
There's
ownership.
something that like just hits different when you're paying towards something that you know is yours and not your landlord's mortgage.
And it's like a safe space for you, because what a lot of people don't realize, and I always say this, there's nothing wrong in renting, but there is the side of renting, especially here in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto area, where
Unpredictable.
it's very unpredictable. Like if you're renting a home that is newer, that have been built in 2018 or after, then you're not subject to the rent control. So your landlord can come to you next year and say, oh, sorry, we're going to increase your rent.
Right.
And you're like, you either accept it or
It's
you have
true.
to move out.
Yeah.
Or even like, especially right now with the fluctuations in the market, we're seeing a lot of renters having to simply move because the owner, the landlord is now selling that property. So like, especially for families, when you have kids involved in schools and all of a sudden you're having to up and go and move schools and all that insecurity around the fact that you don't know how long you're going to be able to stay at that place.
How can you make decisions? How can you plan? Yeah.
It's a big stress factor, I think. So being able to own that property and like make plans for the future is, I think, what gives people peace of mind and that pride of ownership and everything mixed together. And it's something that Ourboro was able to help them accomplish.
Yeah.
So I myself, I'm a home owner with, oh my goodness. I myself, I'm a co-owner with Ourboro, and I can tell you, like, to me, I'm so grateful for having found Ourboro right at the right time for me and my family, because it really like brought me to a place that I can, relax and know that this is my place. I love my home. And I love the fact that I was able to buy with the help of Ourboro.
Yeah.
So I can definitely vouch for that happiness.
So putting on your hat as a homeowner, when we measure a happiness index in our study, we specifically evaluate neighborhood belonging is one, like feelings of neighborhood belonging, just happiness and well-being. We rate them on like feelings of neighborhood disorder, right? So safety in the neighborhoods is kind of what it's meant to evaluate. And just overall, like, does your home meet your needs? And our homeowners score statistically significant, like orders of magnitude better than renters when they're in. So what's your personal, I can't ask you how you responded to those surveys, because I know you would have been sent that survey as well too. But like, how does that resonate with you when we say that our homeowners score so much higher in these categories?
I think one of the things with Ourboro, in my experience, is that because we are co-owning that property together, Ourboro is also careful in picking that property with you. Right. So they're looking at the appreciation potential of that property and the overall condition. We do an inspection. So it gives the owner, the homeowners, also that peace of mind that, somebody else, the experts.
Somebody else cares about this home being okay as much as I do.
Yeah. And absolutely, like with our property, we were able to purchase something, again, going back to that example, like that was much better, that suit our family needs much more than if we were to go on our own. So we were able to qualify to purchase something on our own, but I have 3 kids. And at the time when I looked at the scenario and I compared what I can get on my own versus what I could get if I used the help of Ourboro, I could definitely get something that would suit my kids' needs a little bit better, at a better school district, at a better location. So why not? And it was a great thing for me and my family, and we were so grateful. We love our home. We love our neighborhood. We love the schools, and we get much more involved in that sense because we belong.
Yeah. And there's something when they talk about health and wellness as well too, there's implications there around, like, you think of Maslow's hierarchy, right? When you have your security in the place you live, that's a foundation. That's like a foundational piece in being able to have other factors, build off of that.
Yes.
So, Viviane, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, right? 2025 is shaping up to a very interesting year. There's so many factors, unprecedented in terms of what the world, what's happening in the economy, just even domestically and across the border. What beyond like interest rates or inventory and sales, the data, like what are you telling your buyers when they're thinking about, is 2025 the right year to buy? How is all this going to impact me?
Well, I think there is a good amount of positivity coming into play because we are seeing interest rates coming down, and we have the next announcement now on March 12th. And most people are saying that we will see another rate
Another
cut of
drop?
at least a quarter percent, unless we are thrown a big curveball called, U.S. tariffs,
Yeah.
which may or may not happen. But I believe even though we're still seeing rates trending down, but what I see beyond interest rates
Yeah.
is people being more aware and being more conscious in their decisions.
Right.
So
Interesting.
before, I had clients who would automatically go into a variable rate just because it was the cheapest option.
Okay, but they've now seen what happens.
Exactly. So they're
yeah.
more aware, they're more conscious. And I always have this conversation. I've always had this conversation for, 15 years that I'm in the mortgage industry. I've always asked the questions, what do you feel more comfortable
Yeah.
with? What's your risk appetite,
Yeah.
right? How well do you sleep at night knowing that your rate may fluctuate over the years and, within a matter of months.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people in the past, they would not even give it any thought because
We were in such a stable rate
we
environment.
were extremely stable. I
Yeah.
used to joke that our variable rate was pretty much a fixed.
Yes.
Because it had never changed. And if it changed, it was like a quarter percent and then it would go back
Yeah,
to where
yeah.
it was. So for the longest time, we had a variable rate that was pretty much a fixed rate. And it was the cheapest option. So why not?
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of people would go into that option without even putting much thought into it and what it meant, right? But then after the post-pandemic crisis hit and the interest rates jumped so significantly,
Yeah.
people are being more aware. They're paying more attention to those conversations because a lot of times the mortgage professionals are having the conversation, but
like
instead
you,
of
you're
just
teaching them to think about these and to have these conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another thing is I focus a lot on affordability for my clients. I say, listen, we're not going to focus on how much the bank can approve you. I also want to know what is a mortgage payment that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the bank may approve you for a purchase of $1 million home, but that payment, it may not be something that you're comfortable
Yeah.
with. You may have other priorities.
And other plans. Yeah.
Exactly. So what is the payment? And then oftentimes they'll give me their maximum budget and then I'll say, okay, so then instead of looking at homes for 1 million, we're going to look at homes for 800,000
Yeah.
because that's more in line with your goals.
Yeah.
Right. And if you change your goals, then that's fine. But you got to be very informed into your options and make an educated decision rather than just going with what the bank is telling
Yeah.
you that you're good to go.
I think that is a great recap of in guidance for buyers going to 2025. Right now, there's no excuse for you not to ask the questions, right?
Exactly.
If you are thinking about buying a home in 2025, there's so many resources and options at your disposal. Ask the questions. You have to understand your own goals and your own risk profile because we are in a bit more of a volatile environment. You have to know what you would be comfortable with and kind of use that as a starting point.
Exactly. And I think one of the big differentials, like when we were talking about being a woman in the mortgage industry, I think one of the things is that I take my time to explain
Yeah.
and to help people navigate. And it's not just a transaction.
Yes.
Like, okay, sign here, this is your rate, and and
Yeah.
it's done.
These are big decisions.
It's like helping them understand what it means on their day-to-day living
Yeah.
to have a purchase of this amount, to pay this much. What's going to happen in 5-year time when your mortgage comes up for renewal?
Yeah, exactly.
All of this, it's something that for me, it's important, and I try to make that, to translate that to the client.
To simplify it for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Viviane, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. I think it's so rare to have a guest where you are so vulnerable and you're such a great storyteller as well. So I love that. Thank you for joining us. For those who are just tuning in for the first time, like, subscribe, follow, all of those things I need to get used to saying more eloquently. But
those YouTubers make it so easy, right?
It's so easy. We should have you do it.
No, trust me, I stumble a lot.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that.
Thanks for having
we look
me.
forward to having you again.
Likewise.
Cheers.